This is the 2026 Yamaha R7. It is highly revised, highly anticipated, and it might be the motorcycle credited with saving Yamaha's entire sport bike lineup. This motorcycle has been highly updated for this model year. It now features an entirely new electronic suite powered by a 6-axis IMU, a new TFT dash, a bunch of new updates, changes to the chassis and the swing arm, and best of all, it's just $200 more than the previous version. But here's the question for today's video. Is this enough for Yamaha to keep up with the competition, specifically from the Europeans and Honda? I'm gonna get this motorcycle out on the road and back in the studio for a complete evaluation and review in today's video. Now, you guys already know the drill. Hit the link down below because this is a giveaway motorcycle on my website, yaminoob.co. This is a shorter sweepstakes. This one's gonna wrap up at the end of next week, and we're also gonna give away $2,000 cash along with this bike. Don't miss it, this one's gonna be a fun prize. So become a member, pick up some merch, and join to enter the sweepstakes today. And because I have to mention it, this bike is special, that's why the Dome made a comeback. All right, enough chatting, let's swing a leg and go for a ride. All right, folks, Yamaha R7, the most important bike in Yamaha's lineup, the new entry-level Squid Missile. Taking a quick look, first impressions, it's the paintwork, right? It's the styling that has to be one of the big reasons people are drawn to this platform. It's still one of the most classic looking Japanese sport bikes. A lot of them have kind of lost their way, but Yamaha, thank goodness, brought back some cool flashy paint, some yellow wheels, blue. Motorcycles should be loud. They should be flashy. I am so tired of blacked out bikes, gray bikes, white bikes. Come on, let's pop some color on this. Swinging a leg over the R7, flick the key. Much more premium feeling cockpit, is it not? The display matches the R9 now. This new cutout, kind of like the M1 bike in MotoGP. All the switch clusters. This is a way more premium place to sit than it ever was before. Let's fire her up, shall we? Thumb the starter, got this new, more premium kind of feel to it. But that familiar old 689cc CP2 fires to life. Going 12 years strong without any changes. Well, there's a few changes. Let's get a sound check. You know, it's pretty remarkable that Yamaha made this engine in 2013, 2014, and it's still relevant 12 years later, and they've done so much with it. That must have been one of the most profitable engines they ever designed, I swear. So, pulling away with the R7 in the beautiful hills here in Austin, Texas. Lakes are completely full right now, so check out that view. And this is remarkably different from the first generation bike. We still have that nice stiff feeling, the very super sport ergonomics that the R7 always had. And what's interesting is this bike is actually touted as being a little bit more comfortable to ride than the old bike was. And I gotta say, I'm not really feeling that from the seat of the pants. This still feels like the old, very committed super sport style ergonomics that the R7 in the first generation suffered from. It still kind of feels like a very cramped, very committed riding position. And, you know, honestly, with just 75 horsepower on tap, that kind of defeats the purpose, right? If you're gonna ride a sport bike, you want some serious power, right? Or if you're gonna take it out on track, you want some serious horsepower. So the ultra committed ergonomics, not really working for me, not gonna lie. I would have really liked to have seen the clip-ons actually rise up out of the triple tree. You'll see right down there that they are the traditional, like, old school super sport style clip-ons where they just hang right off of the fork right there. Also, I gotta say, coming into that nice hairpin turn, stock brake pads, not particularly confidence-inspiring on the R7. You have a very generous and healthy Brembo master cylinder right here. You guys can see that is a really nice unit on this motorcycle, but unfortunately the stock pads that this thing comes equipped with just leave a little bit desired. I noticed that you pull on the lever, ask for maybe, I don't know, 30% of maximum braking potential, and you just kind of hit a wall, and you don't get that linear progressive braking feel. It feels like you have to really pull the lever to get some stopping power. So, minor fix, I would say. Spec in some higher spec pads, and you should be just fine. So the big talking point on this bike is the electronics, right? The R7 has only increased in price by about $200, and yet you're getting a motorcycle that is just way more complete feeling. You know, the old bike felt kind of toy-like, a little entry-level, you know, with that old LCD display. This is a much more grown-up motorcycle for not a whole lot more money, which is pretty cool. So we'll turn over here onto this nice road, open her up a little bit. Really nice little intake honk from the R7. You get that tuned CP2. They've made some acoustic adjustments to the intake here, and so you really get to hear this bike when you open it up. And Yamaha, being the tuning fork company, the musical instrument company, their engines always have a kind of resonant musical quality about them. They're extremely fun to use. And again, the CP2, you know, is it the most competitive engine in the platform, in the category nowadays? No, not really. It's definitely lacking on pizzazz and power over its competitors, but it's a serviceable engine. It still works pretty damn good. One area this bike really excels in is it's kind of like, I'd say like mid-speed passing power. That's where most people feel that a bike is not exactly fast enough for the street. And being that it is a 689cc twin, you know, that kind of like burst from 60 to 100 is very satisfying. You can really get on the throttle with this thing, pass whoever you need to pass. You don't necessarily need to downshift like 3 different times and wring the poor little bike out to pass somebody. Other issues, I would say, you know, with this super committed ergonomics, one thing you're absolutely going to want to spec in on this thing would be tank grips. You know, the paintwork, as beautiful as it is, it's very slippery, very slippy slidey, and you're really going to want to grip the tank with your knees and get that weight off of your wrists so that you can properly ride this motorcycle. I'm not going to say it's unrideable without tank grips, but it is 100% worth the very small investment to be able to properly ride this bike. You're not going to want to ride it without tank grips, trust me. That's not going to be a very fun time for you. The R7 is equipped with cruise control now, which is pretty sweet. Super easy to operate. You press this button up here, cruise pops up right there, press it down to set 57 miles per hour, and you get to cruise, no hands on the bar. And that's pretty fun because being that it is a very committed motorcycle, you're certainly going to want to be able to kind of take a little bit of a rest, pop up off the bars a little bit, you know, do that classic old school stance that we used to do on super sports where you take your left hand off the bar and you kind of plop it on your wrist, on your hip like this. You know, you see a lot of guys riding little hip mounted right here, one hand right there. But now with the cruise control, you don't have to do that. You can take both hands off, take a little breather, shake your arms a little bit, because as much as this is a very committed, very aggressive, very sporty motorcycle, Yamaha did intend for this to be used, I think, in equal measures on-road and on track. Now, is it successful in doing both those things in equal measure? You know, I think that's up for debate. One thing that's kind of happened with this bike over the years is that it has become a little numb, right? The R9 suffered from the same issue that Yamaha, in chasing this, like, you know, refinement and this capability and all this stuff, the bike has kind of lost a little bit of its charm and character in that it used to be this very analog, very peppy little machine, and now it's sort of like, well, it's a little vague feeling, and it doesn't really make a lot of sense, I'm going to be honest. This bike is one of those machines that it really only comes alive when you really start to poke on it a little bit, to the point where I don't really think it's responsible or safe to do that on public roads. Like, how much you need to push this bike for it to start feeling really proper is maybe a little too fast for public roads. It doesn't really do the, like, let's say 2/10 to 7/10 kind of riding very well. It's a little vague, it's a little confused, and ultimately I think it just requires quite a bit of poking and convincing for it to feel like a proper motorcycle. Let's go ahead and go up the hill here, use all this torque of the CP2. Can we get around all these cars? Unlikely with the trucks right there. We have to make some evasive maneuvers. So flowing through this twisty road with the R7, And like I said, it doesn't really feel all that great at that kind of like more chill street pace. These brakes aren't super confidence inspiring. You're in this very committed riding position that sort of belies the ultimate performance the motorcycle has available to it. And it doesn't change direction all that gracefully. It doesn't have that sharp changeover in direction that an RS660 has, for example. It feels a little sluggish, which doesn't make any sense to me given the geometry that I looked at and the specs and the weight. The agility that this motorcycle is supposed to have just isn't quite there at street pace. It's a bit remarkable, honestly. I don't know how this bike has the specs that it has, and yet it doesn't really do what the specs say. It's so weird. It's like I can feel that if I was able to be on a racetrack, like, yeah, it would be really fun. It would be, you know, a little muted with that 75 horsepower, but, you know, it'd still be pretty fun to chuck around. It may be that the clip-ons are not long enough or not angled enough. You know, on a traditional race bike, you often have clip-ons that are quite long for leverage, maybe about right here, and then you would have them a little bit wider further out. So it almost feels like the R7 should have clip-ons that are about here, would maybe give you a little bit more leverage to do that kind of aggressive tip-in. But as it sits right now, not a super satisfying ride. I'm not gelling with this motorcycle in the same way that I did the MT-07, for example. The MT-07 worked great for what it was. Enter this braking zone. Yeah, it's weird. It's like it's like it's asking to go faster, 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 and yet I'm on the public road and you're not all that fast. It's like it's trying to write checks that the frame and the motor just can't really cash. I think we got to get back to the shop and kind of like sit down and really think about this bike a little bit more, because I'm left with more questions than answers after riding it.
Right, so the R7 is a bike where the spec sheet doesn't really add up to the riding experience, but not in a good way. Typically, I say that great bikes are more than the sum of their spec sheet, but the R7 is less. Let me explain. This 2026 package represents more of an evolution than a revolution, but it's pretty remarkable what Yamaha managed to cram into this bike for just $200 more than the previous model. This motorcycle, in theory, is a lot of bike for $93.99 MSRP here in the United States. Most of this comes down to trickle-down technology from their other offerings. You can see the same screen and software combo as the R9 or the 6-axis IMU and the ride-by-wire system. This helps the R7 feel more in line with the other bikes in Yamaha's lineup at the moment, but it's created a bit of a hodgepodge that feels last gen and new gen at the same time. The R7 used to represent this kind of like raw and analog twins cup bike in the category, but now it feels like they're very much chasing after the RS660 and CF Moto trends. Yamaha has made a few upgrades that aren't just tech, electronics, and lighting, however. The frame, for example, is 12% stiffer across torsional, longitudinal, and lateral rigidity. Now, to me, that tells me that Yamaha wasn't looking for specific chassis tuning necessarily, but just wanted the bike to be a little bit more stiff and sporty feeling when on the side of the tire. The fork internals were revised with aluminum internal damper rods and slightly softer spring rates, supposedly to control low to mid-speed damping. The linkage for the rear shock was actually changed, and the swing arm pivot point was moved up, and we did get a new swing arm. That changes quite a bit about the motorcycle's anti-squat characteristics. We also get the snazzy spin-forged wheels that are very lightweight, fitted with Bridgestone's S23s as standard, which is a pretty nice spec for a tire. One of the more interesting things they did was adjust the ergonomics, likely seeing that the market wants more comfortable sport bikes, such as the RS660 and GSX-8R. But I'll be honest, as I said in my ride and review, this bike is still really uncomfortable and quite awkward from an ergonomics perspective. There's way too much room around the seat. The bike is really long for a middleweight sport bike, at least it feels that way. And the seating position is way further back than it needs to be too. I don't have that direct kind of like front feeling on the bike that I get from a sport bike. It's just not as sharp, despite the ergonomics and geometry specifications of this bike. It's really weird. Yamaha also fitted integrated turn indicators and has a more sleek and modern appearance as well. The story with this bike is that it's basically the same bones as it had when it debuted, which is to say it's the same bones as an MT-07, but with a couple revisions and slathered with technology. I understand fundamentally that keeps this motorcycle fresh in the category and it gives riders a more premium perception of the bike, but I'll be completely honest, I'm not really convinced it made it a better motorcycle. The R7 is numb, overly aggressive from an ergonomics perspective, and has an awkward rider triangle for regular sized humans, and it seems to have gimmicky features to attract newer riders. And when you consider what this bike represents to Yamaha, it starts to really add up. Let me explain. The R7, despite competing well with other bikes in the segment, is actually a very unique offering. It is the old school looking super sport that is priced like a beginner bike. We've talked endlessly about the death of the 600, the R6, sky-high revs, whatever. But the biggest through line that emerged in the entire shift about 6 or 7 years ago is that Yamaha created one of the best-selling motorcycles of this decade. The R7 is Yamaha's most popular bike. The median R-Bike customer's age went from 33 to just 27. First-time buyers doubled over this time as well. From a business perspective, the R7 is a ridiculously successful gambit. Now, why is that? A lot of it has to do, in my opinion, with the fact that it looks like a real deal sport bike when you're on it. It's the most aggressive package on the market, albeit with the least powerful engine. How ironic. Its larger size, generous seating accommodations, and the beginner plus style engine means this bike is perfectly situated for a slightly huskier, late 20-something American buyer who wants to pick up a sport bike. And that seems to be the most common customer for this bike. No offense to the husky boys out there, but this bike fits them really well, I think. And think about it, CF Moto has been cleaning up shop with these riders, offering edgy sport bike styling for cheap prices loaded with screens, winglets, farkles, and LED light-up sequences. The R7 responded to that demand, and now it's the sort of same gaming PC on wheels aesthetic that's drawing in so many riders. You know, I kind of knew this day would come, but I didn't think it would be so soon. The R7 is a young man's bike, and myself at 33 years old, I think I've totally aged out of it. There's no shame in that, everyone gets older. It just is what it is. At first glance, the cruise control seems out of place on a motorcycle that has such aggressive ergonomics and supposed track day potential, but when I think through the real world use case, this bike would be a young man's only ride. So he would jump on it, ride 2 hours to the mountains, have some fun, and then ride back. Ergonomics be damned. And hey, with cruise control, that makes the journey a little bit easier. I remember doing this myself. I put on 24,000 miles on a Daytona 675R in just 2 years. Halcyon days. There's a sort of willful ignorance that comes from riding motorcycles early in your journey. Without the benefit of knowing any other bike, you just accept whatever you ride. And typically you'll tell yourself and everyone else around you that it's the best and everyone should own one. It's the hubris of being young. So really, that's what the R7 does best. It's a bike for someone with no reference point, and I think they would really enjoy it. But there's a little bit more to this story too. Much like the R9, the R7 is a blank slate. You need to modify, adjust, and tailor several elements about this motorcycle to get that kind of agile Twins Cup sport bike that it claims to be. It's simply not ready out of the box for prime time like the RS660, for example. The tech package is largely superfluous here with just 73 horsepower and 49 foot-pounds of torque. The bike simply isn't powerful enough to warrant advanced electronics, although cornering ABS is a nice safety feature. What used to make the R7 charming was its relative lack of nannies and the cable throttle. Now that it's more advanced, what you're left with is a rather confusing motorcycle that is not up to the task. What is the purpose of this bike over an MT-07, for example? That it has fairings and clip-ons? It's not even close to being a track-ready motorcycle in my opinion. It's not comfortable for road riding, and it has no gain in performance over the naked bike, which would create a reason to buy it. I mean, imagine this thing with a 20% bump in power over the MT-07, then you start kind of getting in the ballpark. I tested a new generation MT-07 on road and track, and I found it to be plenty capable. I also thought it was much more willing on road, not suffering from the same strange problems that plague this bike. At the end of the day, a bike just needs to give me the right feeling. And I have to be honest, this bike simply does not give me the feeling I need from a motorcycle. It's uncomfortable, slow, kind of numb. It's not really willing to change direction as much as the spec sheet would imply. And before you get up in arms, I checked everything about this bike: tire pressure, suspension setting, anything else I could. It simply isn't the agile, nimble bike that's promised when you buy it. It doesn't have an inline-4 scream like the ZX4RR. It isn't comfortable like the RS660, and it's down by 30 horsepower, so it's a little sluggish for a sport bike. It also doesn't have a proper frame either. To be honest, this is gonna sound crazy, but even the Suzuki GSX-8R understands the assignment better than the R7. That bike has a sharper feeling front end, better brakes from the factory, more torque, and it's more comfortable. It's rare for a new motorcycle to disappoint me so thoroughly, and it's a bummer that it's a Yamaha since I'm usually such a fan of their bikes, but it's very difficult to make excuses for the R7, and I gotta call it like it is. It presents quite a conundrum. As a product that supports Yamaha's motorsports division, the supersport genre, and their bottom line, the R7 is objectively a very successful motorcycle. If you're a new rider or if you have about a year of experience under your belt, the R7 represents a pretty classic sport bike style in an affordable package brought to you by a legendary Japanese marque. Without a reference point, you'll really enjoy this motorcycle. But for the rest of us who have a little bit more serious seat time, a more discerning motorcycling palette, and sure, maybe a few more rings around our proverbial tree trunks, this bike is simply not fit for purpose. Unfortunately, I'm gonna rate it a 5.4 out of 10, one of the lowest scores that I've given in recent years. I personally struggle to find any redeeming qualities out of this package other than it gets more riders into the sport at an affordable price. And hey, that's pretty important and a pretty respectable claim to fame. But wow, what a humorless and uninspiring motorcycle. And I mean, you've seen me ride low power bikes and have a lot of fun. I think the Ninja 500 is a great package. So is the RS457. Come to think of it, I'd probably rather ride those two bikes than this one. I think that's where this bike really flops for me. When I think of nearly any other sport bike, I'd rather ride that bike than the R7. It's a tough sell, and I gotta call it like I see it. Now look, if you're a new rider, you're gonna have so much fun with this motorcycle. It's the whole ignorance is bliss thing. Click the link down below to get entered to win because hey, I'm clearly not the right person for it. And this sweepstakes will end soon, with next Friday being your last chance to win. And we're gonna hand it over with $2,000 cash. So you can pick up some gear, do your MSF, and get this thing registered and ready to ride. Thanks for watching today's episode. I will catch you guys in the next one.